Hi there, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for a cheerful journey of educational fun and informative videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the excitement with your friends. I'll be here throughout the video to provide a little feedback when needed. Enjoy! Hi there, it's me again. Just wanted you to know that I am using my custom made yellow silicone molds, which can be found on my website, as well as all fondant used during this video will be satin ice. For any additional information on items used, please refer to the information attached to this video. Be right back. I like to use cornstarch rather than powdered sugar just because I have this sweet ant thing, and I feel like, if you don't get up all the powdered sugar, it attracts sweet ants and fruit flies and stuff. So I like to use cornstarch instead, but feel free to use whatever you're comfortable with, just sharing. Also, be mindful of how much cornstarch and or powdered sugar you use. It can tend to dry your fondant out unnecessarily. So just be mindful. Only use as much as you need to use to keep it from sticking to your surfaces and your tools. Now here I am using this really thin plastic impression mat that I purchased from Amazon. You can find the information for this mat in the description for the video. I do try and roll it one way, then start again where I started and roll in the opposite direction, just so that I can try and get the best possible outcome from the mat. Take a look at this. It did pretty well. What you think? Also, this cutter is one of my faves. I'm almost certain I got it from Amazon, but I've had it for several years now. You may be able to find something similar. If not, no worries. Create your own design. Come up with your own individual look for your toppers. That's what I normally do. Now this cutter is 4 inches from top to bottom and about 2.5 inches from left to right. I like to smooth out the edges of my fondant pieces once I cut them out, just to make sure they look super neat. Try it. Now, once again, I am going to be using my silicone mold to make our bunny. You can find that mold on my website. And hopefully it helps you create more than just bunnies, but a bunch of other little things. Now, once again, I am going to be using satin ice fondant throughout this project. I'm going to be using a gray colored fondant for our Valentine's Day bunny. I achieved that by combining a little bit of black satin ice fondant with a lot of bit of white satin ice fondant. Do you tend to use food colors to dye your fondant, or do you use fondant to dye your fondant? Let me know down in the comments. Took me a little longer to come up with the color that I wanted in the gray, as you can see here, but I finally came up with the right color combination and was able to create a very, very nice light color gray fondant to make my little Valentine's Day bunny. What color would you like to make your Valentine's Day bunny? Drop me a note in the comments section. Just in case you were wondering, those lips that you see on my workstation, that is one of my molds that can be found on my website. It's actually a 4 pieces to that one mold, which allows you to have creative ability to make whatever type of lips or mouth you'd like to make. Okie dokie, back to our regular programming. I do tend to need my fondant for a while. I like the fact that the warmth from your hands will loosen up the fondant and take out a lot of the imperfections that you may see. I'm also applying some cornstarch to my mold. It's a brand new mold, so it's still kind of a little sticky a little bit. So I do tend to put a little cornstarch in my mold so that my fondant will come out cleaner. Also, I take my time to really make sure I completely fill each cavity of any mold that I use so that I can have the best possible outcome for my piece. Also, I rarely use a knife or anything sharp to clean off the excess fondant from my molds. I find that can damage your mold and sometimes pick up little pieces of rubber and puts it into your fondant, so I don't normally do that. Here you can see I had a piece of brown fondant that somehow got into my gray. That is a big oopsie. So I elected to just make it all over again. I just really like everything to be very, very neat. And it only takes a minute to redo something so that you're putting your best work forward. You're probably wondering why there's already a head on my workspace. Well, I initially started making that head and remembered that I wanted to do one with closed eyes and lashes. So I had to cut the video, cut out the part I didn't want, and start it from here. So, nope, you're not seeing double. You didn't miss anything. This is where I had to do an edit. Sorry. Hope you're enjoying. Once again, the white substance that I'm applying to my workstation is cornstarch. You may opt to use powdered sugar if you'd like. Also, I'm using this balling tool to make the area where I want to put the eyes. Balling tools can either come in a metal ball like this and also a plastic form as well. And normally there are two different balls on either end of one tool. So it's almost like you get a two for one. But I love balling tools, and I don't have a particular reason why I choose the metal over the plastic, other than the fact I just pick the size balling tool I need and I go with that. So I don't really have a preference. Fondant sticks to both of them to me equally. So I really don't have a preference as much as I use what size I need. And again, all the tools that you see me using here, the information for those tools and all of the supplies that I use to create this bunny can be found in the description portion of this video. I do tend to need my fondant a lot, especially if I feel like it's a little dry. I've been working with fondant for so long that I can, just from the feel of the fondant, the way it feels in my hand and in my fingers, I know if it's too hard to work with. And I normally need it until it feels comfortable to me, it feels workable to me. So I just rolled little pieces of fondant into like a ball shape, and I've dropped them inside of the cavity that I made previously for the eyes. And I just kind of drop it in. I use my balling tool to smooth it out in my hand. I didn't use it on this particular fondant figure, but I do have a silicone mold on my website. It's called Circle Around, and it makes these little half circles that you can use for eyes. I'm going to post a video here on YouTube to show how that particular silicone mold is used. I didn't use it here, but I do use it when I'm making eyes to ensure that they're both the same size. I try to keep these big fluffy brushes on my workstation. I do tend to use a lot of cornstarch when I'm making things because as I need the fondant, it gets workable, plus it gets sticky. So I do tend to use a lot of cornstarch. So I do have a big fluffy brush so that I can kind of sweep away, which is not a good idea. I should be vacuuming, not sweeping. But I use it to remove some of the fondant from the pieces as I work on them. I'm making the little eyelashes that will go across the eye. And then what it is like a very thin little rope or sausage line of fondant, if you want to call it that. I try to use my pinky finger so that I can try and get the fondant little rope as uniform in size as possible. Sometimes when I use one of my other fingers, it won't come out as good. So I try to use my pinky finger to roll it out. I'm going to actually make both eyelashes from this one piece of fondant, which is what I normally try to do just because black fondant tends to dry out very fast. And I want to make sure both of my eyelashes are as close to the same size as possible. You do see here I'm applying a very little bit of my glue. You can use water if you like. Just be careful when you're working with black fondant and using too much liquid to glue it down. Black fondant tends to run. So you don't want it, you want it to be tacky and not wet. Never make your fondant pieces wet with water or glue or whatever. You want it to be more tacky than wet, if you know what I mean. I used one of my fondant tools that's called a leafer tool, and I just used it to help me make sure my little lash was in position because these are very small pieces. They may not appear to be small on camera, but they are very, very small. Too small for my fingers to manipulate them, so I do like this leafer veining tool that I'm using here, and also the description for this tool can be found in the description for the video. Now what I'm doing is I'm kind of pushing down toward the nose part of the eyelash because I want to give it like a little curl. And I also placed that black fondant, which is going to be the lash, right in the, like almost not maybe 3/4 of the way down from the top. And I'm just using my tool to kind of give the eyelashes a little arch. It makes it look a little bit more realistic, in my opinion. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm also going to basically use that same technique where I take a ball of fondant in the palm of my hand and you gently roll it into a teardrop with one side being skinnier than the other one. That's how I make my eyebrows. And then once I get the eyebrow on the piece using tacky glue or water, not wet, once I get it on there, then I'll shape it into whatever shape I want my eyebrow to be based on whatever the expression is I want my fondant piece to have. I also notice that sometimes when I see fondant figures that have been made, they look weird in the face, and that's probably due to the fact that the eyes were not right. They're either too far apart, too far down on the face, and the pupil part of the eye doesn't match the expression. So you gotta kind of step back and take a look at your fondant faces to make sure the eyes, which to me I always start with because that's the center of everything, and then I try to work my way out from there. I start with the eyes and I work my way out. I'll do the mouth, the nose, the ears, or any of those in any order, but I always start with my eyes first when I'm making a face. I'm gonna work on his little nose now. And again, that's another important part of a face. I took a little fondant away because I felt like it was too big. I can normally sit a piece next to another piece and know if it's gonna work. I guess it just comes from years of working with fondant and just making stuff. I don't know, but I normally will sit it next to what I'm making and I can tell if it's gonna work out right or not. I also try and make it a habit, if I can, to test the piece before I call what I like to call commit to it. And what I mean by committing to it is that you've put the glue or water down and it ain't, you don't want it to move. It's fine. So that's what you see me doing here. I had to double check and the size wasn't quite right. Um, and I'm going to use another tool, another type of veining tool to make the little nose part because what I want is for his little nose to sit down in a cavity and have that white part come up both sides. It makes it look more realistic if it's sitting in that little cavity. So you'll see that there's like a little triangle type piece in his nose, and I want that so that his nose will sit in between the white, which gives it a more 3D look to it. What you think? I also made his mouth out of that same piece of white fondant that's a part of, I guess, his cheeks and his nose. And here you see me actually using a household toothpick to simulate the whiskers in his little cheeks. So I just used, because he's so tiny, I used a Q-tip. Now sometimes I'll use a balling tool for this, but the balling tools for this size fondant piece was too small, so I opted to use a household toothpick instead. The pink color that I'm going to use for his nose and for the inside of his ears is actually made from the bright pink or the hot pink color from Satin. And I use just a pinch of it with some white in order to make the color pink that I wanted. I didn't have any light pink, which I rarely buy light pink colors, light blues. I normally just make that from the darker colors by adding white into it. But this is what you see me doing. I actually made the pink fondant from, I would say, maybe 1 part hot pink, 4 parts white. If that makes any sense. I'm not all that good with like measurements and stuff. So that's like my best guesstimation. It was like 1 part hot pink, 1 part hot pink fondant, and like 3 or 4 parts white fondant to make it this light color. You know what? Save yourself some trouble and just go buy some light pink. Right? Okay. Okay, now that he's done his little face, just take a moment to look at it like eye placement with nose placement, eyebrow expression, and his little nose and face. You want it all to be in, you want it to look as, as aesthetically pleasing as possible. You don't want a wonky looking weird face. um, you always want to step back from your face and make sure your eye placement, nose, eyebrows, and everything is in agreement with one another. So here I'm going to go ahead and place him on his little base because I'm ready to give him ears and different things like that, and I don't want to have to move it again. So he's actually going to live on this little plaque. So I again added a little bit more glue and or water than I would on his face, just because it's a big piece and I don't want it to move. So here I'm just tidying up around my fondant. If I see any pieces that maybe I didn't notice when I pulled it out, or anything I may have messed up while handling it, I go ahead and clean that up. When I tell you, you can have a simple piece, and if that simple piece is not clean, it just doesn't read right. Make sure your pieces are very, very clean. Here I'm going to just freestyle like a little white part to go on his belly. And as you can see, I didn't have a template or anything. I just rolled it out and I cut it into the size that I think is going to fit. Again, I can basically lay something next to something else and I can just tell if it's going to fit or not. I don't know where that comes from, but I can just tell. Sometimes I'm spot on, sometimes I'm not, but I'm normally very, very close. So I added just a little bit of glue there to put his little white belly part on. Again, using my favorite tools. Those are actually tools that they use to, originally do flowers, gum paste, and flowers like that. But now we find that they work great for any part of fondant work. So I love these. Those are PME. I used to sell them on my website, but I don't have them available right now. I'm going to be making his ears. This is for the inside of his ears, and you saw that I had a little bit of pink and a lot of bit of white. So that's how I've been making my lighter color pink. I love to mix two fondants together to come up with a color that I need. I don't know why, I just rather do that instead of mess with food color, because food color can be so food coloring can be so messy, and I don't like it all over my hands. So again, I'm just kneading my fondants together and making sure that they're workable. I am going to use a cutter to make the bunny ears. I'm going to try and use a cutter that is close to the sizes I need as possible. You can also find the description for these little cutters in the description section of this video. So I'm going to use these two, the bigger one to make the gray part of my bunny ear, and then I'll use the smaller one to make the pink part of my bunny ear. Again, adding some cornstarch because that's what I prefer. Especially when I'm rolling out fondant, I like my fondant to be easy to work with. So I find that if I add a little extra cornstarch, it doesn't stick as much as it would if I didn't. So I'm making the outer portion of my bunny ear, which is the gray part. And like I said, I always go around the sides of my fondant just to make sure it's clean. It's horrible to see pieces of fondant with straggly little pieces sticking out. That's not good. Like, make it a point to smooth around the edges of your fondant pieces. It makes the world of a difference. So now I'm going to roll out the pink part for the inside of his ear. ears. And it's pretty thin. I don't need it to really be thick because it's going to sit on that little green fondant base. So I don't need it to be too thick. I am using my little tool to get my fondant out of this cutter because the cutter is very, very small. Now when you make the ears, you want to use two cutters that are give you enough space to have between the pink and the gray. You want it to have a little distance between the two for it to look more realistic. I was just checking to make sure because I always like to check. Make sure everything is the right size. So that's one ear, and I just added a very, very little bit of glue to that as well. You don't need a lot. Just making sure the little ear is positioned appropriately on that gray part. All of that matters in the way your pieces present in your final work. You know, make sure you do the little fine details. Make sure everything is clean and neat, and you'll be surprised how different your work looks, how different things appear, even when they're super simple. Clean work is the best work. Now I'm actually just pinching the bottom of this little teardrop shape to make the ear kind of sit up a little bit. I am going to use my tool to make it a little bit more exaggerated because I want that to be seen like the little crease. Trying to figure out which way I want these ears to go. And I kind of want them offset because he's like a sleepy Valentine's Day bunny. I'm going to use the cutter to cut the tips off of these because it makes it a little round. It gives like a little roundness to it so it sits more flush up against his head. So that's why I use the bottom of that cutter, just because it's rounded. And I want his ears to sit directly on his head neatly. Putting a little extra glue down. So I'm going to be folding one of the ears up. And I want it to stay while I do that. And normally, by the time I get ready to do something like this, the fondant is hard enough where it will stand on its own. And I use the end of the brush that I'm applying the glue with to make the little curve on this. Also, this balloon that you see me using, that's also a mold that's available on my website. It's called Dawn's Balloon. I actually took this off another piece that I did because I didn't feel like making another one and it was hard. So I took it off of another piece that I made and I'm going to use it as part of this. I'm just going in, making sure the little ear is where I want it to be and that it's positioned the way I want it to be positioned. I do record these a lot on live, so if you see me pause and I'm not moving or doing anything, it's because I'm on live at the same time. Well, I'm actually recording these on live. Now what I did here was I rolled a piece of gray fondant into like the little snake that we did for his eyelashes, but it was a little bit thicker. Go back and take a look if you missed it. I used that to make the little hairs on the top of his head. Here I'm just trying to get them to curl in the direction that I want them to curl in. Gonna make one more little hair. I just simply used fondant rolled in a ball, and I used my index finger to roll it into like a little rope or a little snake type thing. And I applied that with a little bit of glue right to the center of his head to give him some hair. Because after all, he's a hair, bump, rabbit hair. Never mind. Making these fondant pieces can be very therapeutic. Nothing is better than having an idea in your head and then working to have that thing come to fruition. It is very therapeutic to me. Now I'm going to use some of that same pink fondant that I had from the inside of his ears, and we're going to make what I like to call a flyaway fantasy bow. I just made that up just now. But that's what it looks like. And I love bows. I think the bigger the bow, the better the bunny. Try to say that 10 times. The bigger the bow, the better the bunny. The bigger the bow, the better the bunny. Try and say that. So again, need your fondant. The more you need it, the more workable it'll become. If I had to describe the consistency of the fondant, I would say it's like brand new Play-Doh. You know how when you got brand new Play-Doh as a child and you open it up and it's very soft and cushiony? It's like that. It's like brand new Play-Doh. If it's stickier than that or stiffer than that, you got a problem. So if it's stiffer, you need to keep working it. If it's stickier, you need to add some kind of powder, either cornstarch or powdered sugar. It's up to you. I use cornstarch, but you can also use powdered sugar. So I'm going to roll this out. It was pretty thin because this bow didn't have to stand up on its own. I didn't make it thick. I am going to use a straight edge cutter to cut this bow. That's what I like to use normally when I make my bows. If I can make one cut all the way across, I would prefer that. I also try and use a ruler as well to make sure my lines are straight. It's important to make sure those lines are straight. Now again, this particular tool, the description for the tool can be found in the description area on this video. And like I said, I try, if I can, use my straight edge to cut the entire bow. And when I say the entire bow, I mean just the loop part. I normally go back and recut the tails. But what you see me doing here is I folded my piece in half to find the center so that I can try and have two equal sized tails. Then what I do is I take two ends together and I do what I call like a W on my bows. I make it almost like a W so I can have that little dimple in the bow. You saw me stick my paint handle in there. That was just to open the bow up because I don't like bows that are not open, full, and fluffy. So I'm just using that to open them up. I'm going to put them together and make sure they're going to fit. Again, like I said, I normally could kind of see what I need to do just by sitting the object next to the fondant piece, but here I'm actually going to try and piece it in because that's a tight spot. It has to go in. So I'm just double checking, and I'm going to cut this end of it where the two pieces came together. I'm going to cut it on a slant because I want it to sit flush up against his face. And I'm just doing the same thing on the other side, trying to figure out which one will work best at the top, which one at the bottom. So when I feel like I'm satisfied, I'm going to put a very little bit of glue. It doesn't have to be a lot. You don't want it to leak from underneath or around the fondant. That makes it look real tacky. So I'm just going to push them on in there and make sure they're where I want them to be. Use my fondant tool to get into that small space because my finger could never fit in there. And then I want to make sure that those little dimples in the bow stay there because I want it to stay looking fluffy. I don't want it to lay down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very small piece of fondant and I'm going to use that to make the knot of the bow. And once I get the piece in there, then I'll use my tool to kind of add some detail to it. But it's just a ball of fondant. I kind of rolled it into like a little ball. I kept taking it away because it was too much. And then I just sat the ball in there and then used my tool to kind of stretch it out and to make it look more proportionate with the tails of the bow. I use whatever tool I have to use to get the result that I'm looking for. And a lot of the tools, this particular blue tool is a tool that's actually used to work with clay. Because clay is similar to fondant, you'll find that a lot of the clay tools can be used to work fondant. I really do try and give my fondant pieces as much detail as I possibly can without it going overboard or looking gaudy. The only way you can do that is if you plan ahead and not do things at the last minute. Fondant figures is not something you can do at the last minute. You have to allow yourself enough time to work with the details and the features and the pieces of your fondant figures. You cannot do it last minute. I mean, you can, but the outcome is not going to be as nice as if you took your time and made it. So here I'm going to make the tails of the bow. And again, like I said, I like to try and use one piece for the entire thing. So if I'm making two tails, I want to make one piece big enough to make two. If I'm making two loops, I want to make a piece big enough to make two loops. And I just felt like it was a little bit too big, so I cut it down. And I'm going to use just this one piece to make both tails of my bow. I don't know what I'm doing here. I have no idea what this is. Oh, I know, I'm losing it. I wanted to put a little band around his neck, a piece of ribbon. So it looked as if the bow was tied around his neck and not just sitting on either side. It's those little details that make you look at finding pieces like, why does this look so real, so interesting? It's just the little pieces that make the difference. And again, like I said, if you're rushing to do this last minute, these are the little details you'll probably overlook or omit just because you don't have the time to do it. Again, using one of my tools to work that little piece of fondant into his neck. When I originally put it down, it was too close to his lip and it didn't look right. It looked like his the bottom of his head was missing. So what I did was I pushed down on the gray body part a little so that the ribbon around his neck fell just below his face, giving it a more realistic look and not like a choppy, weird look. You want to make sure your fondant pieces are visually appealing and appropriate. And again, I do that same W type of thing on my tails too. That's how I make the dimple that you see in the loops and in the tail. So it's fold once and then fold again. It's almost like a W. That's the best way I can explain it. And it gives you that little natural dimple in your loops and your tails that bows always have. Gives it like a more 3D, 4D look. Well, 3D since it's not all the way around. So I'm going to see how I like it, see if it makes visual sense. Like I said, normally I can kind of figure it out just by having it close enough to the piece. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. I'm going to make the top one a little shorter, and it's also going to stand up off of the piece. So the bottom longer tail is laying on the green base. But then I wanted the shorter tail at the top to kind of sit off of it, giving it even more of a 3D look. I do use pieces of paper towel as often as possible to prop up my fondant pieces until they dry. Two reasons. Number one, paper towel is readily accessible, and because you use such a small piece, it's cheap. It literally will probably take me 2 years to use a roll of extra large paper towel doing little pieces like this because of how small of a piece of paper towel you need. And the other reason why I use it is because they hold up really good. They don't normally leave an impression in your fondant, which some other items can do. It just, paper towel is, like I said, and it is breathable, so it allows your piece to dry. And if for some reason you get paper towel stuck to your piece, it's easy to pull away. It's very easy to get it loose if it gets stuck on your piece. So paper towel is an inexpensive, great way to prop up some of your fondant pieces while you're allowing them to dry. Now the only thing that we have left to do on this little bunny is finish off his balloon, the Dawn balloon again, which is one of my silicone molds and can be found on my website. My website information is included in the video description here. So I'm going to take now, to make this string, you can either use fondant, which is the difficult way to do it, or you can find a very thin piece of string from like one of your craft stores, and you can use that instead, which is cute also. But because I try and make all of my fondant pieces as fully edible as possible, I'm going to sit here and roll out the thinnest piece of white sticky fondant I possibly can. And you're going to see me make several attempts to do that. I could have cut this out, but I wanted you to see that real world does happen. Real world issues and events. So I got it. It worked out. Just a little perseverance, a little patience, and it actually turned out the way I wanted it to. Just rolling it a little bit more, because you don't want a really big, thick piece of string on this little piece. The piece itself is pretty small. I'm going to apply the very tiniest amount of glue because, again, red is a color fondant that tends to bleed as well. And I don't want it to bleed into my white string. So I'll only put enough down to hold the string where I wanted it to be. Now I did debate on if I wanted the string to go across his ear, and I decided that I didn't want that. So I cut it off and I put it behind his head, and I glued it down with just the smallest amount of water. I think I used glue. And I used my fondant tool to position that string where I wanted it. And then I thought it would be cute to have the string come from behind him and go across the bow on the other side. Then after I put it there, I said, I don't think I like the string sitting on top of the bow either. I'm going to cut it off and reposition it. And then I'll let a piece of that string hang off the side and make it look even more realistic. Normally come up with these designs on the fly. I'll know what I want to do, and then I'll develop it and fine tune it as I go along. Again, using a piece of paper towel, household paper towel, I'm going to use that to prop up that little piece of string that's hanging off the side of that green plaque. Then I'm going to bring that string back because he's got to be holding the string, he or she has to be holding the string, so I'm going to bring that string up and over as if it's actually in his little hand. Now you got to make sure you match the same thickness from the rest of the string or it's going to look wonky. I'm going to add just a little bit of glue so that this string can rest right on his little hand. Don't cut things with the X-Acto knife in your hand. That is very dangerous. I have a very bad habit of doing that. You put yours on your workstation and cut it like that. Don't do the thing that I'm doing because that's dangerous. So don't do that. Cut everything on your work surface. And I'm just positioning the string across his hand as if he's holding on to that balloon for dear life. I'm going to put like a little, what do you call it, like a glimmer, I guess you could say, you know how just to show that the balloon is actually like shiny. It has like a highlight, I guess you could call it. So that's just a little highlight that I put on the balloon to give it a little bit more excitement and realism. Again, it's always those little bitty details that like shock your mind. Like, this is unbelievable, but it's the little details. Now you can also achieve this little piece by using white paint, white edible paint. I like poppy paint for this, but I decided to use the fondant because I just wanted it to pop. That fondant makes it stand up and gives it like an extra little look that I like a lot. Then I'm just dusting his little cheeks with a little pink petal dust. I will put the description of the palette that I use in the video description. So it's just a very light colored pink that I applied to his cheeks. And I'm going to use that same little pink and apply it around his little, on his little belly. Just using a regular fluffy brush. Some people use cosmetic brushes, which are fine as long as you haven't used them before using them on your piece. But these brushes, the description for these brushes can also be found in the video information. I am using poppy paint to put a little spark on his nose. No, that's not poppy paint. That's edible art. That's edible art. I use poppy paint as well. So either one or whatever brand you have. I just happen to have edible art close by, so I picked that up. Adding a little pink petal dust to his belly button, just to give it a little bit more zest and sassy. And here we are. We've completed our little bunny. This would look so cute on the side of a cake or on top of a cake, on a Rice Krispie treat, or even a cake sickle. Maybe the front of a chocolate covered Easter apple or Valentine's Day apple. It would definitely look cute on one of those little mini cakes that you find in the bento box with the cupcakes. So that's just a couple of ideas. Thank you so much for joining me. I truly hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoy creating this little Valentine's Day bunny. Again, everything used in the video will be within the description attached to this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you can, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. You can find me on all social media platforms. I have attached my LinkedIn here on the video, which could take you to my website and my other social links. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for additional videos that I'll be coming out with soon. Don't forget to visit my website for those moles. Okie dokie. Ciao, ciao for now. Peace.